Okay, good. Here we are. How are you?
Yes, I'm so well, and it's so good to see you. God, what a crazy time we've been living in.
I know, Margie, and I've been reading, and well, actually, I listened to your most recent book, You've Got This, on audio, which I don't normally do, but for some reason, I just felt like doing that this time around, and I really enjoyed it. I just listening to you talk, I had this massive flashback to 10 years ago with
Yeah.
Nanette and that conference and those women in that room somewhere in the basement and just everything that you've done since then. I was
It's been
massive.
a really wild 10 years.
Yeah,
Big 10
really
years.
had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what I wanted to, so as I said, I listened to your book, which was so much fun. And what I wanted to talk about, because we don't have a whole lot of time, so I want to just focus on the way you take the reader through doubt, self-doubt,
Mhm.
sabotaging doubt, to fear,
Mhm.
to compassion,
Mhm.
which is different from your other books. I mean, I've only read the first two, Find Your Courage or
Mhm.
and Stop
Stop.
Playing Safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas now the world that we're in and the communities that we're in, it is really more and more about compassion, and you start with yourself and then for your community. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Yes. Well, I think compassion's always a great place to be operating from, but of course you have to couple it with other things too. It's not about
Yeah,
just being compassion, right? But it's an important part of it, particularly when life is difficult, and life's been really difficult for a lot of people.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's not really, at your arm's length, most of the people you talk to have got something. I mean, something big that they're dealing with. I mean, we all kind of always have, but some of it you just don't talk about. Whereas these days, everyone talks about everything. Also, your focus around ambition and the story about the woman with the plus size fitness wear.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
Brenda.
love that story. Yeah. And
Yeah.
just how you that connection to your doubts and then just doubting your doubts, as you say.
Yeah, well, I think just recognizing all of us have self-doubt, of course. It's not, that's nothing new, and it's nothing that I don't think anyone is immune to it. I think women can struggle with it more than men, just because of the gendered society that most of us have been raised in. And yet all of us, I believe everyone can rise above it. And it's why I write about doubt. I mean, that's why, the subtitle of You've Got This was the life-changing power of trusting yourself. And trusting yourself, self-trust is the flip side to self-doubt. Yes, and the two can coexist. I can be doubting myself and still go, what the heck, I'm just going to take that leap anyway, and operate from that belief of I've got this, even when I'm not quite sure how I've got this. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm just going to believe that I can figure it out, and how that is really life transforming to operate from that place of faith and trust over fear and doubt. Yeah.
So true. And I know for most, well, no, not even for most, any job I've ever gotten, I've never been qualified for. I've always gone for a job that, and men do that all the time. They don't worry about, well, I don't have the right degree or I haven't had enough experience. They just go for it. They don't question their ability to do the job. Whereas I know in all my jobs, even from the very beginning of, being 12 years old and a babysitter at my parents' country club, instead of one kid, I had 10 kids. So I was making $10 an hour versus $1 an hour for one kid. So I think that's probably one of the things that really struck me in listening to you talk about your book. And I think that so many people could benefit from reading it because most of us are struggling with doubt and fear, and a 45-minute keynote about how to face your fear is not the same thing as reading a book about it. And the questions that you get people to ask themselves, like, I love the questions, and about forgiveness and what can I do today? And talk a bit about that. I'm just going to find them in my notes while I.
Well, I think firstly it's just recognizing. Well, I think just Carol, key to all of this is recognizing that the thoughts we think aren't necessarily the truth. And who we are is not what we think. Like, we can have all sorts of thoughts. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I can do this. I tried once, I was hopeless at that. Just because we're telling ourselves something doesn't mean it's true. And when we can distinguish who we are from what we're telling ourselves or about a situation, like, there's power in that. It's like, well, what if I operated from a different belief? Like, and just to experiment with that, to play with that. Well, what if I actually believe that I am entirely capable of doing X or changing Y? And that just opens up. It literally, the interesting thing is, the neuroscience shows it actually opens up our peripheral vision. When we change that inner dialogue, it actually has a physiological impact on us. So we literally see more possibilities for action, which then allow us to take other actions we mightn't have thought to take, and then get different results and go, wow. So there's a real power in actually really challenging those critical voices, those doubts, and playing with another belief system. And, I can't tell you how many times over the years I've thought, I'm terrified that I will be inadequate for the task, but I'm just going to give myself permission to play with the idea that I am wholly capable. And then in taking the action that opens up for me, going, you know what, gee, I actually can do more than I thought I could. And that's why, and I really believe we do ourselves such a profound disservice when we let that doubt, that voice of doubt, sit in the driver's seat. And it's actually an act of public service to defy that doubt and take action in its presence, because not only do we gain confidence and gain competencies and learn new knowledge and enjoy our lives more, but actually everyone around us benefits too, because we get to grow into the person we can be, and versus kind of living in this much more limited circle of our own potential.
Yeah, that's so true. And in some ways, you almost get to a point where it's kind of funny. You're almost laughing at yourself that you've done this. You know what I mean? When you go towards something that for however long it's taking you to do it, the process of getting there, you've been like, I can't do this. Yes, I can. No, I can't. Maybe I will. And then when you immerse yourself in it, at least my own experience has been, I'm laughing at myself. And I know that when I'm laughing and I'm relaxed, then, as you say, I'm doing a good service to the people around me. It's when you're tense and you're like, will I, won't I, what do I do? I'm stuck, that people feel that are close to you, they feel that. I'm interested to know about how you managed your PhD, plus your career at Korn Ferry, plus your global speaking, plus your family, plus your health and fitness, which is obviously working. Like, how did you do all that?
Well, I should just clarify, I didn't do all of it at exactly the same time. I only joined Korn Ferry, 6-7 months ago. And I had finished my PhD at that point. and my kids have actually all left home now, so I no longer am juggling, basketball drop-offs and soccer and school things and all of that shebang. I think I've never been one to sit idle for very long. That's something I have to work at, to just like chillax. I mean, I can and I do, but it's not somewhere I'm not happy sitting by the side of a pool for 10 days in a row. I like, get me moving, get me doing something. So I tend to recharge pretty quickly. I take a lot of time. I'm very, very intentional about recharging energy, but I do it regularly, but for smaller amounts of time. But yeah, my PhD, that came about, Carol, because I was living in Melbourne. I thought I was going to live back in the United States, and then found myself living in Singapore. My husband found himself transferred there. It wasn't part of our plan. And in Singapore, many people have a live-in helper, and we got one. And I suddenly found myself with a huge amount of time not spent on a lot of things that time's often spent on, everything that involves just food, cooking, shopping, everything. And I was like, you know what? I guess I could, take up yoga. I could become a Pilates teacher in my spare time, or I could, an alcoholic, or I could do a PhD. So I decided, I would just use that extra 20 hours a week toward a PhD, and dived in and continued speaking around the world, traveling. But, you can do a lot when you've got a goal. I mean, often we fill the amount of time we have available. And when like, I got to get this paper done, I've got to get this research done, and I've got a 12-hour flight. Well, you don't spend it watching movies, right? You're reading and you're writing. So I've always been pretty industrious with how I've used my time, and so here you are.
That's fantastic. And what about your writing style? Like, do you, I remember years ago when I met Gail Kelly launching her book, and I sat next to her and I asked her, how do you, what's your writing style? Like, do you get up every morning at 5 and write for 2 hours? And she said to me, go and get the book. Have you read the book Bird by Bird?
Yeah.
And at that time I hadn't. And she's like, just get that book and you'll understand what I go through. And you mentioned it in
I
You've Got
do.
This.
I read Bird by Bird, actually. And before I wrote You've Got This, I read Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott. For those, I highly recommend it to anybody who is aspiring to create anything, just to be creative, to bring anything to life in the world that you would be creating.
So good.
Anything. You could be a builder, you could want to be a fashion designer, you might want to be an author, you might not, but it's so relevant. And, as she says in it, give yourself permission to write a shitty first draft. And then she said, after a really shitty first draft, you might write a slightly less shitty second draft. And eventually, and I think about my book, You Find Your Courage. I grew up on a dairy farm in the Aussie bush. I never did a writing class, had no idea where apostrophes went. I was filled with doubt about my ability to write any book before I wrote Find Your Courage. And I remember my husband saying to me, Margie, I know you think you have to, be a literary genius to write a book, but people value your newsletters, because I send out a newsletter. And he said, just give yourself permission to write the best book you can. And one day when you're a brilliant writer, you could write another book. And it kind of was aligned with the wisdom in Bird by Bird. Give yourself permission to just do the best job you can right now at this moment, at this point in time in your life. And it mightn't be a piece of literary genius. It mightn't be a masterpiece, but I think if You've Got This, which, you've enjoyed reading, who I am as a writer now, having written 5 books, I'm just a way better writer. But I wouldn't have got to be able to write You've Got This if I hadn't started with just giving myself permission to write a book. And it's not that Find Your Courage was a bad book. I think I've just evolved as a writer because you write. Same as being a keynote speaker, right? If I'd waited till I could be a keynote speaker, I would never have got on the first stage. So I think there's a real power in giving yourself permission to focus on doing better versus being the best. And in that space, you just have permission to try things, not be brilliant, and to learn and to sharpen and to polish whatever craft it is you want to get better at.
It's so true. And I love the beginning. And who hasn't been there or had a child that's been there, where it's like summer holiday and you've got to get through this project or whatever. It's like, just bird by bird, mate, just one bird at a time. It's so good. And in her TED talk, when she says something like, at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah, I think I heard Nelson Mandela said that, but maybe it was her that first coined it. But it's a phrase I really love, and I think all of us need to listen to that. It's so easy to look at someone else and go, you know what? Oh my God, for me, oh, you've done a PhD or you've written a book or blah, 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 blah. And the fact is, we're all just figuring it out. And Carol, we've all got our unique combination of gifts and skills and talents and hard-won wisdom. Like, some people have had to deal with extraordinarily difficult situations and sorrows and struggles. And, I think often, what we have to give to the world and bring in and share with those around us can come from sometimes those hardest times. But just don't compare where you're at or what you're good at or not good at with anyone else. And like run your own best race. And I think for all of us, if we just focused on doing the best that we can with the time and the talents and the resources that we have, not what other people have, not what we wished we had, not what we think we should have, but what we have right now, you know, that
Can you
opens
still
up.
hear me?
Yeah, I can. I can hear you.
Okay, well, that's where normally I have the book in my hands, but because I used audio, I don't have it. But I always like to conclude the conversation with something that I read in the book. So I found one, and I really seriously will encourage everybody I talk to read your book. You've Got This, because I really enjoyed the question part, the reading, and so much of it I related to.
I've got it on my shelf. I'm going to grab it.
Oh yeah, now. Hold it up for us.
There you go.
Okay. So one of the things that I really enjoyed was the questions for reflection, and the ones that I think are most relevant to what we're talking about right now is, what did I do well today? What am I grateful for? And what did others appreciate about me today? And just do a real little review of that for yourself every evening. The first three I'm pretty good at, but the one that number 4 I'm not very good at. I'm always like, oh well, that's not, anyone can do that, you know. So that's one of the things I'm going to work on, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this would feel the same way.
Yeah. I think we often don't acknowledge ourselves. And the things that we're naturally good at, we often totally take for granted. Well, it's no big deal that I cooked a meal for my family, or I wrote a letter here, or I ran 5 miles, or whatever. But not everyone can do what you do easily. In fact, some things you do easily, other people find really, really bloody hard. So I think it's so important to not, and maybe you did something that isn't easy for you that actually was really hard. Well, just pat yourself on the back, and it doesn't matter if others find it easy. It's just appreciate yourself, and just, I think all of us could take a little more time to just be kinder to ourselves, particularly when life is hard.
I agree, totally. What I meant is that I don't take compliments very well. You know what I mean?
Appreciating you. You know what, Carol, me either. And here's what I'm learning to do, and I'm literally practicing it. And, Marianne Williamson taught me this. She complimented me, and I talked myself down. She said, I'm so glad to have been on your podcast. And I said, oh, well, it's not a very big platform. I mean, it's nothing like Oprah's. I mean, gee, it's not that big. And she said, there is nothing holy in diminishing yourself. Just say thank you. Yeah. And I was like, thank you. And so I have been trying ever since, when I get a compliment, to just say thank you. So you need to practice that too.
Okay, so I'll give you a compliment. I'm so glad to know you and to have been on this journey with you, having met you. I think it was, what would have been, like 2012?
It was 2000, exactly.
And 10 years ago. You had just come back to Australia, having been in America, and I just remember thinking, as an American, I could tell what you were seeing, because it was just like, what's going on here? And to where you are now, Dr. Margie Warrell. So well done, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for talking to me.
My pleasure, Carol. Anytime. I so look forward to when we can have a hug and have a wine and see each other again.
Sounds great.
All right.
Have a good night. Thanks, Margie.
Bye.
Cheers.